Welcome back, and today we're doing a reaction video. So let's grab a quick beverage and join me back here and get cozy. So if you're new here, I'm the Intense MD. I'm a double board certified intensivist here to demystify the intensive care unit, but today we are reacting to a video called Heart Attack Teacher by Rescue 911. This television show was on when I was a kid. I remember watching it growing up. I actually distinctly remember a particular episode and I cannot find that. So I'm wondering if I made it up in my head that this episode existed or if it was a different show, but if anybody remembers the episode where somebody's shoelace got stuck in an escalator and it sucked their foot in, please let me know. I found a similar one with a child's arm getting stuck in an escalator, but I swear there's some shoelace one because I remember being hyper vigilant as a child, making sure I stepped up and over getting off the escalator so my shoelaces would not get stuck. So if anyone remembers that, if that episode exists in the universe, let me know because it was driving me crazy trying to find it. So let's get into the video.
We begin at a local high school in the small town of Tip City, Ohio, on the morning of May 9, 1988. 17-year-old Tess Donauer was a senior at the school.
And I was looking for Mr. Suter.
I definitely think I had my bangs styled this way for my first or second grade photo.
Which is why I saw it happen. Mr. Suter was just gathering papers, getting his attendance sheet out.
So it looks like he just kind of gasps and then collapsed. She looks like she's running to get help.
Really, really scary. Immediately, instinct, I ran to the office.
She didn't have far to go.
Suter fell down and called the ambulance. She told me to go down and get Mr. Judy, who knew CPR.
So that's good. There was somebody on site that knows CPR. It's always good if you know there's somebody around who knows CPR to go get that person and call 911. Always call 911 first.
Someone in the office called the police, while teacher Irv Collins ran to help.
I suspected it was more than just fainting. I remember thinking that I'd better get to that cafeteria as quickly as I can. Ralph had already started turning blue. His eyes were clouded over, and he was frothing at the mouth. If I had a Kleenex, I remember cleaning that out of his mouth and then checking his jugular vein to see if there was any pulse.
Okay, so you check the carotid artery for a pulse. The veins are not pulsatile, the arteries are. The carotid artery, which is the artery that leads to the brain, and the jugular vein that leads away from the brain. You're not checking the jugular for a pulse, it's the carotid. And you can also check for pulses in the femoral arteries, in the groin. So those are the two bigger arteries that you should feel a pulse. The biggest thing is you want to make sure that the brain's getting perfusion, getting blood. So you want to make sure that that artery is pumping.
At that time, I could feel nothing.
Everybody, please move back. Get out of the cafeteria.
I knew that it was a very serious situation, and I didn't want the kids to be around Mr. Suter.
Okay, so if you're somewhere you do not feel a pulse, you need to start chest compressions. He's taking his tie off, don't matter. CPR is the most important thing, start chest compressions.
Tess found health teacher Jim Judy, a certified CPR instructor, in his classroom.
I had in the back of my mind that it might be a coronary just because of the risk factors. He didn't exercise, he was a smoker, plus his age, that I knew that it just might be a heart attack.
Kind of called him out on national TV. He was he doesn't eat right, he smokes, he's old. I don't know if they said how old he is in the beginning of this. So usually in men, you're considered at increased risk of heart attack after age 45 and women in age 50. Women have the protection of estrogen, which protects the blood vessels from forming plaques. So we have a little bit more time. Once you go through menopause, you're at higher or at the same amount of risk as a man your age. And that's not to say people under 45, under 50 won't have heart attacks. I've seen people in their 20s, 30s, 40s have heart attacks. And in the general population, these are the age groups. And smoking, of course, is an increased risk for heart attack among many other things. And of course, your diet can either protect you from heart disease or increase your risk if you're having a lot of, high cholesterol, fatty foods. These can increase your risk of heart attack. I recommend people follow up with their primary care doctors at least once a year just to make sure everything's okay. Sometimes they'll check your cholesterol and other markers to see if you're at risk for a heart attack or any other disease.
Jim, there's no pulse, no breathing.
I went to go in, but the teachers were pushing all the students out, so I just kind of stood back and watched.
1, 2, 3.
The way that they're doing the basic life support is different now than it was back then. So it used to be ABCs, it would be airway, breathing, compressions, and now it's recognized that starting chest compressions is the most important part of that whole thing. Even if you just do chest compressions and don't do rescue breath.
It's been 5 minutes since high school teacher Ralph Suter had suffered a heart attack during study hall.
1, 2, 3.
Volunteer rescue workers met at the station to pick up their vehicles and headed to the scene. 26-year-old paramedic Gary Jackson was in charge.
I had a lot of alarm bells going off on this run for some reason in my mind that it was going to be a bad one. Keep in mind when a person's heart stops or they stop breathing,
I'm pretty sure my dad still has these glasses. Oh well.
4 to 6 minutes to get oxygen back into that system before brain damage sets in.
Ralph was not blinking his eyes. He had no pulse. For all practical purposes, Ralph was gone.
I went into just a different mode in which I didn't feel anything. There weren't any emotions I felt at that particular time. It was just a matter of doing the procedure, and it was almost like watching somebody else do it.
Both paramedic Jackson and EMT Todd Stalker had graduated from the same school less than 8 years earlier.
The things that were learned from my mind at that point were, I don't know who this person is yet, and I'm really afraid to find out.
Yeah, I know they said this was from a town in Ohio. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania where, everyone knows everyone, so it's probably not unlikely that EMS shows up to a scene and they recognize the person who is in distress. So I'm sure that kind of adds some emotion to the call when you respond and you're like, oh, I recognize this person, especially if it was a teacher.
1, 2, 3, 4.
A friendly teacher, a good teacher, anybody had a specific problem, he'd more than willing to stay after class or he'd stay after school to help you out with it.
Headset on. Let's see what he's got on the monitor.
We got BPAP.
Shocking.
Charge paddle.
I was scared because I hadn't really been on that many cardiac arrests.
I know a lot of times they show on television when they're doing resuscitations for someone who's in cardiac arrest, they'll show them shocking the patient. And like they said, his rhythm was V-fib. That is what we call a shockable rhythm.
3. Okay, let's hit him again. 200 again.
In VFib, the heart is basically quivering. There's no pump action. The electrical activity is very disorganized.
Right, so that's why you see on the monitor it looks like just a bunch of squiggles, and why you try to deliver electricity to it to try to organize that rhythm.
Our protocol for people in VFib is immediate counter shocks.
Go BPAP. Okay, one more time. Let's hit him at 300 this time.
Everyone clap.
Clear.
So in the hospital, in addition to giving shocks, I'll be loading them with antiarrhythmic medications such as amiodarone, pushing calcium, pushing magnesium, things to try to, organize a rhythm in the heart, and medications and electrolytes that affect the electrical activity in the heart. Something else that I noticed, and I know I keep harping on this, but it is so important, is after the shocks, we don't wait and see what the new rhythm is. We go back on the chest immediately and continue CPR.
I was handed our initial cardiac drugs. I administered those drugs per protocols.
Okay, so they were giving drugs.
And the electrical activity of the heart. At this point, I decided that we needed to shock him one more time at maximum wattage and go ahead and let him go to the hospital regardless of what we got.
With that, yes, you got a pulse. Okay, let's get
Everybody.
Yeah, and they asked, do you have a pulse with that? Because just because you have a change in rhythm does not mean that you have a pulse. If he did not have a pulse, it would now have been converted to pulseless electrical activity, which means the heart still has electrical activity, but there's no pulse. So that's still considered cardiac arrest, and you continue CPR.
Body was elated. It was as though we had received a shot of adrenaline.
The tension in the room was let out. You could breathe again. It's one of the first true conversions of an arrest patient that I'd ever witnessed in the field.
1, 2, 3.
The immediate administration of bystander CPR by Mr. Judy and Mr. Collins in this situation gave the squad something valuable to work with when they got on the scene. It's very rare that I've ever seen civilians give effective CPR. My concern, what degree of brain damage we're going to have here.
I got the doors.
He was in a coma. It's during that time that was some.
So they said, we don't know what degree of brain damage he's going to have, because after somebody's heart stops beating for a period of time, and like I said, the blood goes up to the brain, it's delivering oxygen to the brain. If you don't have oxygen to your brain, you can get what's called anoxic brain injury, and this is permanent brain damage. We'll see patients who come in after cardiac arrest and they were able to, fix their heart, fix that problem, but their brain is permanently damaged and they stay in a comatose-like state. That's why the chest compressions are so important, and that's why we found over time that doing good chest compressions and early chest compressions can prevent this type of brain damage.
The most concerned whether we had been effective giving CPR, because in the back of your mind you're always thinking, well, maybe we just didn't do an effective enough job, didn't get enough oxygen to the brain, and that he might have suffered brain damage.
Doctors trying to prepare his wife Diane for the worst.
When the neurologist told me that Ralph might be in a coma for a long time, I was numb, and he said the longer he was in a coma, the more neurological damage there probably was going to be.
Perhaps in part because of Diane's faithful support, Ralph came out of the coma suffering only temporary memory loss.
This room looks like they put him in a closet. Like, this is not what an ICU room typically looks like. I don't know. Like, I know this is a reenactment stage, but it's, unless, I don't know, maybe ICU rooms used to look like this, but it looks like he's in a dark closet somewhere. Just looks very strange.
After undergoing heart bypass surgery, Ralph was back teaching that same fall.
Today, Ralph is one of the happiest guys I've ever known. He's changed his whole lifestyle. He quit smoking cigarettes. He's watching his diet, and he seems so much more relaxed.
How many of you will be working on me?
So that just goes to show that good CPR can save lives and early responding. And good for him, he got coronary artery bypass surgery and was able to go through that rehab process and go back to work in the fall semester. So good for Ralph, and it sounds like he took that as a wake-up call to change his lifestyle. I hope that stuck around and he was able to continue with his life of being a non-smoker or former smoker.
I think knowing CPR is one of the most important things that anyone can do for themselves and anyone else around them.
Yep.
It's not just something that people say, it really does save lives. Even the children realize that we've been given a gift of extra time here.
This motivates anybody to get CPR certified. It is important. I've seen people come in and their wife initiated CPR at home and they're able to walk out of the hospital. So it's their spouse saves their life, their children save their life, their neighbor saves their life. Learning CPR, just basic, learning how to appropriately do chest compressions can be a lifesaver. If you have any requests, I'd love to hear them and I will be happy to react to them.